Now you're back. So let's write the get/book/book ID route. So this route is to get a specific book by ID. So our endpoint is going to have /book/ the ID of the book. Could be 1, 2, 3, 4, or whatever. So for that, we're going to use route parameters. In Express, route parameters are represented with a colon followed by the name you want to call the parameter. In this case, I just call book ID. So these guys, book ID, is going to appear in the rec object as a property of the rec.params object, okay? So if you go here, our app.js, we already have the /books. Let's make another route, app.get route. What's the path? /book/what? Book ID. This is a route parameter because there's a colon. This variable name will appear in the rec.params object. We'll define the res arrow function. So I'm just gonna do a res.send. I'm gonna send back rec.params so you can see it's actually what's inside this object right here. I'm gonna send back rec.params. That's where the route params are. Let's save it. Go to Postman. Oh, mind you that we have to restart the server. I can kill this guy. Notice we keep restarting the server, and that's very annoying. So there's actually a tool to not have to restart it and have it do automatically. It's called Nodejs. If you want to do it, I'll teach you right now quickly. You can do npm install --save dev. By the way, I is if you say I, that's like a shorthand for install, and Nodejs is the module. This is gonna use save dev because this is just a tool for development. We don't want to have this package in the production build for the app, okay? You don't need that. So it's gonna take some time. Great. Now to run Nodejs, instead of running the app node app.js, you're going to use Nodejs. You're Nodejs app.js. But if I do it like this, it's going to call upon the globally installed Nodejs. We don't have it. I don't have it. So I'm going to use the Nodejs that was installed as a dependency for our current project with npx prefix. Just before doing that, go to the Atom text editor package.json. You can see dev dependencies now has Nodejs version 1.18.4. So this is just for development. So our node modules right here. If you notice, there are many files. So we want to use the Nodejs from this node modules directory. To do that, we use npx prefix with the Nodejs app.js. With that, Nodejs is going to be watching the file app.js. And if you make any change, for example, if I go here, I change the book, I add a comma or something, and I go back, you're going to see it restarts the server after making a change. That's great. So now we don't have to restart the server every time we make a change. So that's Nodejs. Okay, so let's keep going now. Back to where we were before. We wrote the endpoint /books/book ID. So let me try it out. I'm going to put /1 for the ID. Send. And we got a 4 found. What's going on? Let's go back to our code. Save this. App.js. We got app.get/book. Oh, we forgot an S, right? The S right here. Save it. Go back to Nodejs. Go back Postman. We already have Nodejs taking care of restarting the server. Try again. Now we got an object on the JSON right here with book ID 1. So this guy, this route param, that we call book ID appears in the rec.params object. That's how we get the route parameters. Okay? So let's go back. So we know that rec.params has .book ID. So we're going to use that to search for a book. But now we're going to use our book module, find one. Let's call a new function find one, where you give the ID, okay, right here. And then it's going to find by the ID. But mind you, one thing before we continue. rec.params.bookid is a string. Look at the Postman response. This is not a number. It has quotes, so it's a string. So all route parameters are string. If you need the number, actual number type, you need to parse it. Remember that, always parse your parameters. So instead of doing this guy, let's first parse it. So I'm going to say book ID is going to be parse int with the rec.params book ID and 10. We're going to parse this into an integer because we assume the ID is as an integer in our case. Okay, so remember our data structure uses an integer for the ID. So with that, we're going to use book ID right here, already parsed as an integer. Mind you, we're doing very simple things here, so I'm not assuming this might not give out an error in parsing it, or the argument is given not as a number, as a string. So there are all these special cases you have to handle. Let's ignore that just for the sake of focusing on Learning Express, okay? So be aware that book ID, somebody might not write a number there or something else, and then you have to handle that. Anyway, so we assume you're going to create the find one function that when you call it with the ID of the book, it's going to return the object, the book object, whose ID is book ID, and whatever name it is. Okay, but if you just send it like this, right? What if it doesn't find it? It's gonna return null, right? Oh, we'll get to that later. So let's focus on writing find one. So I'm gonna save this and go to the book.js. I'm gonna write find one right now, and the parameter for this method is going to be the ID, the book ID. So to find a book by ID in this list is very simple. We can use the find method of the array type, right? So let's do that. So we're gonna return books.find, and we're gonna find a book whose ID. Okay, so we're gonna find a book whose ID is the ID given. We assume this is an integer, okay? Must be a number type of integer to match these guys. We're doing strict equality. So that's it. If it doesn't find it, it's going to return null. So let's try it out. Save this, go back to the app, just see if things are okay. Great, let's try it out in Postman. We know the book by ID 1 exists, so let's try it. Send it, so we got it back, right? ID 1, title, picture of Dorian Gray. Great. That's awesome. Let's try number 2. All right, book 2 and book 3 and book 4. There's no book 4, so we got nothing because we returned null. So that's not very good to get a 200 OK of null. So you want to usually, if you don't find a record, you want to say to the user 404 status code, okay? And usually some error message if you want. So going back to our route definition, we gotta think through this, and we don't want to return null, so let's do something else right here. So let's put this guy in a variable called book. Let's say const book is book find one book. Now we have one condition here. This guy sends the book assuming it exists, but if the book does not exist, what do? If book, if it's null, this is going to be true, so we execute something. So we want to return a response with a status of 404. So we're going to send status 404 in this case. Let's see what we get. By the way, we should return right away, otherwise it's going to call res again, and that's not good. So make sure to return after this early res send, okay? We don't want to send a book that's null. So let's try this out. Send status is going to send a response back with status 404, usually used for not found. Things are not found. So let's try it out. Going back to Postman, send again. Look, we have a status not found now. That's great. Now we didn't have any specific error message in JSON format. If you want to add that, let's try it. Go back to the text editor, and you can concatenate here with a send, an object. You can put, I don't know, a message, for example, error message or description. You can say, could not find the book, something like that. Let's try. Seems like it did not work. Let's think through this. Send status 404, send. Let me look just a moment. I'm gonna try something. I put the 404 before the message. I think this is already deprecated, so but I want to see the error message in the console. Let me try the Postman. Now we got could not find a book, but this is deprecated. Use res.status status.send. Okay, so we should actually use. So this is a good practice for us to deal with deprecated things. So you read the express deprecated message. So yeah, I should not do that. Don't use res send with the status quote and the body anymore. You should use separate things like res.status with the status quote and send with the body. Okay, so I just missed that. I put send status here instead of just status. Going back to what we had before. This should be just status, okay? res.status 404, and then you send something. Save it, try it again. There you go, 404, and the message could not find the book. Great. Nice. So let's review what we did. In this lesson, we learned how to make the /book/book ID route. We learned about route parameters. If you put a colon followed some name, it's going to appear in the rec.params object with that same property name. Notice that this is always a string, so if you have a number there, you have to parse it. For example, in our case, parse the book ID into an int. Then we built a find one fake database response, which is if you give a book ID, you get it searches for that book ID. If it doesn't find it, make sure to return a response with status 404 and some message. And make sure to return early from the route, otherwise you're going to go on and try to send something again. That's not good. Always remember the return. And then if it finds the book, this condition will be false, so it's not going to execute anything here, but it's going to send the actual book object as found. Okay, so that's it for this lesson, and I'll see you on the next one.